Have you ever looked a man dead in the eyes, a man you buried, a man you mourned for 8 months, and watched him pretend he doesn't know your name? Have you ever stood in a stranger's backyard and told his new woman that the life she's living is built on a lie? Because that's exactly what Margaret did. And what happened next shook an entire family to its core. I am his wife. His legal wife. We were married for 38 years. The man you know as David doesn't exist. That's Margaret, 62 years old, standing on the back porch of a pale blue house in Savannah, Georgia, saying those words to a woman who had no idea the man she loved had already been loved, and then erased the woman who loved him first. His face went white. Her face went cold. And somewhere in the distance, sirens were already on their way. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 8 months earlier, Margaret's world looked completely different. 8 months earlier, she was just a widow trying to remember how to breathe. 8 months earlier, she still believed the lie everyone had helped build around her. She still cried into his pillow at night. She still whispered his name in the dark like a prayer that would never be answered. And then one Tuesday morning, in the middle of a hardware store on Abercorn Street, she heard a cough. Not just any cough. His cough. The same dry, rattling sound she had listened to across kitchen tables for nearly 4 decades. The same cough that used to drift from the garage while he tinkered with things that didn't need fixing. She turned around. And there he was. Standing in aisle 7, holding a can of wood stain, reading the label like he had all the time in the world. The man she had buried. The man whose name was carved into a headstone she visited every single Sunday. Her hands went numb. Her chest locked. And every truth she had accepted for the last 8 months crumbled right there between the paintbrushes and the sandpaper. This is that story. Let me take you back. Margaret Hollis married Richard Hollis in the summer of 1986, in a small Baptist church outside of Charleston, South Carolina. She was 24. He was 27. Broad shoulders, strong hands, the kind of man who opened doors and carried groceries without being asked. Her mother said he was dependable. Her father said he had good eyes, honest eyes. And Margaret believed them both because back then, she had no reason not to. They built a life the way most people do, slowly, carefully, one decision at a time. They moved to Savannah for his work. He ran a marine equipment supply company, the kind of business that kept him on the road more often than she liked but paid well enough that she never complained. She raised their son, Kyle, kept the house running, handled the books when he asked, smiled at company dinners when she was exhausted, and told herself this was what a good marriage looked like. Sacrifice wrapped in silence, held together by routine. And honestly, for a long time, it was good. Richard could be funny when he wanted to be. He grilled on Sundays, taught Kyle how to fish, danced with her in the kitchen when old songs came on the radio. He wasn't perfect, but he was hers. Or so she thought. Then 8 months ago, Richard died. At least, that's what everyone told her. A single vehicle accident on a back road near Brunswick. The call came at 11:30 at night. Kyle answered because Margaret had already taken her sleep medication. She woke up to her son sitting on the edge of her bed, holding her hand, telling her that her husband was gone. The funeral was closed casket. They said the impact was too severe. They said it was better to remember him the way he was. Margaret didn't push back because you don't argue with grief when it's still fresh. You just survive it. So she did, barely. She stopped cooking for herself. She stopped answering the phone. Friends brought casseroles she didn't eat and flowers she let die on the counter. She sat in his recliner for hours, wearing his flannel shirt, pressing her face into the fabric until his smell finally faded. That was the day she sobbed the hardest, the day even the ghost of him started to leave. Kyle checked in, but it felt routine. A call every few days, a visit once a week. He seemed distracted, impatient, like grief was an inconvenience on his calendar. She told herself he was dealing with it in his own way. Sons aren't taught to sit with pain. They're taught to move past it. So she gave him grace he didn't deserve. 6 months in, Margaret started forcing herself out of the house. Small things at first. A walk to the mailbox. A drive to the pharmacy. Groceries once a week. She joined a grief support group at her church, sat in a circle with other widows, and listened to women describe exactly what she was feeling but couldn't say out loud. That hollow ache in the morning. That moment before sleep when the bed feels impossibly wide. That sick habit of reaching for the phone to call someone who will never pick up again. She was healing. Slowly, painfully, but healing. The kind of healing that doesn't look like progress from the outside but feels like war on the inside. Every single day was a fight to keep going, and Margaret kept going because that's what women like her do. They endure. They adjust. They carry things no one ever sees. And then came that Tuesday morning. Margaret needed a new latch for the back gate. A small errand, nothing important. She drove to the hardware store on Abercorn Street, the one with the red awning and the creaky wooden floors. She parked in the same spot she always did, walked in, grabbed a basket, and headed toward aisle 7. That's where she heard it. A cough. Short, dry, followed by a low grumble about price stickers being too small to read. The exact complaint Richard made every single time they went shopping together. She used to laugh at it. She used to hand him her reading glasses and say, "Here, old man." Her body recognized the sound before her brain did. Her fingers tightened on the basket handle. Her stomach dropped the way it does when you miss a step going downstairs. She turned around slowly, already telling herself she was imagining things, already preparing the excuse that grief plays tricks on the mind. But grief doesn't have broad shoulders. Grief doesn't wear a navy windbreaker and khaki pants. And grief sure as hell doesn't stand 6 feet tall with a scar above its right eyebrow from a fall off a fishing boat in 1994. He was right there. 15 feet away. Alive. Margaret's legs moved before her mind gave permission. She crossed the aisle in 4 steps, her voice already cracking. "Richard," she said. "Richard, it's me." He turned. And for one fraction of a second, she saw it. Recognition. Not confusion, not politeness. Recognition. His pupils widened. His jaw clenched. His body shifted backward just slightly, the way a person does when they've been caught. Then it was gone. Replaced by a mask. "I'm sorry," he said, frowning, tilting his head like she was speaking a language he didn't understand. "Do I know you?" The words hit her like a slap. 41 years, and he was looking at her the way you look at a stranger asking for directions. "Richard, stop it," she whispered. "It's Margaret. Your wife." He shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, my name is David. David Callahan. I think you might have me confused with someone else." He said it gently, carefully, the way people talk to someone they think is losing their mind. And that gentleness, that rehearsed compassion, made her blood run cold. Because it wasn't confusion on his face. It was performance. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and scrolled to a photo from their anniversary dinner 2 years ago. The two of them at Vic's on the river, his arm around her shoulders, both smiling. She held it up between them. "Look at this. Look at your own face. You wore that blue tie I bought you. You ordered the shrimp and grits and sent it back because it was too salty." He glanced at the screen. Just for a moment, his jaw tightened again. Then he looked away. "I'm sorry you're going through this," he said. "But that's not me." "Show me your hands," she said suddenly. He hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. But he lifted his left hand anyway, maybe because refusing would have been worse. And there it was. The crooked pinky finger, broken when he was 16 helping his uncle reshingle a roof in Beaufort. The same finger she used to trace with her thumb when they held hands in the car. Her stomach turned inside out. "I need to go," he said quickly, already backing away. "I really do hope you get the help you need." And he walked away from her. Just like that. 41 years, and he walked away holding a can of wood stain like she was nobody. Margaret stood frozen in aisle 7. An employee appeared beside her and asked if she was all right. She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the front of the store, watching him pay at the register. Cash. Richard always used a card. This man used cash, folded neat, pressed flat with his thumb. The same habit. Different method. Like someone who'd learned how to not leave a trail. She followed him outside. She watched him load bags into a gray sedan she had never seen before, a beat-up Buick with Georgia plates and a dent on the rear bumper. Not Richard's truck. Not anything she recognized. But the way he placed the bags, heavy on the bottom, bread on top, that was Richard's hand. That was her husband's muscle memory doing what 40 years of habit had trained it to do. She memorized the plate number without thinking. Then she got in her car and followed him. She stayed back, 3 car lengths, 4. She gripped the wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. They drove through neighborhoods she knew, past the old library, past the park where Kyle used to play Little League. Then they turned into a part of town she rarely visited, quieter streets, smaller homes, big oak trees draped with Spanish moss. He pulled into the driveway of a pale blue house with white shutters and a wooden porch swing. A neat yard. Potted ferns by the door. The kind of home that looks peaceful on the outside. He stepped out carrying bags. The front door opened. A woman walked out, mid-50s maybe, dark hair, a soft smile on her face. She kissed his cheek and took a bag from his hands. They spoke quietly, the way people do when words aren't even necessary anymore. The way Margaret and Richard used to. Then 2 kids came running out. A boy and a girl, maybe 8 and 10. They threw their arms around him and shouted, "Grandpa! Grandpa, did you bring the cookies?" He laughed. That laugh. Margaret would have known it in a pitch-black room. Warm, lopsided, starting in the chest before it hit the throat. The laugh she fell in love with in 1985. He was crouching down, hugging them, balancing grocery bags, living a whole life she had never been part of. Margaret sat in her car 3 houses down, engine off, hands trembling. The sun came through the windshield and warmed her face, but she felt nothing. Tears slid down her cheeks, not sobs, just a steady, silent stream, the kind that comes when the body finally understands what the mind refuses to accept. She took pictures. The house. The car. The address on the mailbox. Her hands shook so badly most of the photos were blurred. But a few were clear enough. When the light faded, she started the engine and drove home. She doesn't remember the drive. She only remembers sitting in her garage afterward, staring at a photo of his face on her phone, zooming in again and again, whispering the same question over and over. If Richard is alive, who is buried in his grave? She didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table under a single lamp, surrounded by photo albums she hadn't opened in months. She moved between them slowly, comparing. The photos from that afternoon against decades of memories. The scar above his eyebrow. The mole near his collarbone. The slight unevenness in his ears that nobody noticed unless they had spent 40 years studying his face from the next pillow over. Grief doesn't invent scars. Strangers don't share the exact same broken finger. This was not her mind playing tricks. At 3:40 in the morning, she called Kyle. He answered on the 4th ring, groggy. "Mom? Do you know what time it is? I need you here. Right now." "Mom, if this is about Dad again, grief does things to people. You've been through so much." "I saw him, Kyle. Yesterday. Your father. Alive." Silence. Then, sharper, "Mom, what did you take? Did you miss your medication?" "I followed him home. I saw where he lives. I saw his family." Her voice didn't shake. That scared him more than anything. "Stay there," he said. "I'm coming." He arrived 40 minutes later. found her at the table surrounded by photos laid out like evidence. She handed him her phone without a word. She watched his face as he scrolled. Confusion. Disbelief. Then something she had never seen in her son's eyes. Fear. He looks like Dad, he said carefully. But people look alike. Did you see his hand? The finger? Kyle rubbed his face. Mom, we buried Dad. You were there. I was there. Closed casket, Margaret said quietly. Did you see his body, Kyle? His jaw clenched. No. Neither did I. I want to go back there, she said. Come with me. Mom, this isn't healthy. Are you coming, or am I going alone? They drove in silence. When they turned onto the street with the pale blue house, Margaret's pulse spiked. That's the one. Kyle parked a short distance away. After a few minutes, the front door opened. The man stepped out carrying a coffee mug, heading toward the car. Kyle leaned forward. The color drained from his face. He stared, frozen, as the man drove past them. When Margaret looked at her son, tears were streaming down his cheeks. The ugly kind. The kind that comes with something breaking. He didn't start the car. His forehead dropped to the steering wheel. His shoulders shook. Mom, he said, barely holding. I'm so sorry. Sorry means guilt. Sorry means knowledge. Sorry means this was never just in her head. Tell me, she said. He lifted his head. His eyes were red, raw, full of shame. Dad didn't die in that accident. He had another family, Mom. Over 20 years. That woman, Claudia, he lived with her part of the time. He said it started as a mistake and never ended. Margaret stared straight ahead. How long did you know? About 3 years. I found out helping him with the marine supply books. Duplicate bills. Utilities, insurance, 2 households. The marine supply business. The job that kept him traveling. The job she had defended to friends when they said he was gone too much. And you said nothing. He begged me not to. He said it would destroy you. He said you'd take half of everything. Everything we built, she corrected. Kyle nodded, miserable. 8 months ago, he came to me with a plan. He wanted out. Wanted to be with her permanently. But divorce meant losing too much. So he decided it would be easier if you thought he was dead. Margaret's hand started shaking. Easier for who? For him. And for me. She turned sharply. For you? If he died, everything passed to me. The business, the accounts. He transferred the real money to himself under a different name first. The rest came to me. I thought I could take care of you. Give you a monthly amount. A monthly amount. Like an allowance. Like a child. Like someone who didn't deserve to know where her own money went. How did he fake it? She asked. Terrifyingly calm. There was a man. Homeless. Terminally ill. No family except a niece he hadn't seen in years. Dad paid him. Paid the niece. They staged the accident. The body was too damaged for viewing. The casket stayed closed. Margaret remembered the phone call from the police. Kyle insisting she not look. The funeral where she sobbed while people held her hands and told her how strong she was. You let me bury a stranger. Yes. You let me mourn for 8 months. Yes. You watched me fall apart, Kyle. You watched me stop eating. You watched me cry in front of strangers at that grief circle. He broke down completely. I didn't know how to stop it. I thought if enough time passed, you'd heal. I thought it would be kinder. Kinder? She laughed, a short, hollow sound. You stole my right to the truth. You stole my grief and filled it with a lie. She closed her eyes. breathed slowly. Take me home. Mom, we need to talk about this. Take me home. Neither spoke on the drive. When they pulled into the driveway, she got out without looking at him. He called after her. She didn't answer. Inside, she sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at the life she thought she had lived. She was done being the woman who cried in silence. Whatever came next, it would not be forgiveness. It would be a reckoning. Now, before Margaret makes her next move, I want to take a quick second to talk to you directly. This story is real. It was shared on an online forum by the actual person who lived it. I changed the names, the places, and some of the details to protect their privacy, and I added a bit of fiction to fill in the gaps, but the core of what happened is true. On this channel, I take real stories like this, break them down, and add psychological insights so we can all understand the patterns and protect ourselves. If that sounds like something you want more of, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what Margaret does next, you do not want to miss it. For 3 days after that car ride, Margaret didn't call Kyle back. She didn't answer his texts. She watched him pull into her driveway twice from the upstairs window and leave when she didn't open the door. 41 years of being a good wife had trained her to always respond, to always smooth things over, to always be the one who fixes it. This time, she chose silence. Not the silence of fear. The silence of someone who is finally thinking clearly. And during those 3 days, something clicked inside her. She started seeing the whole picture, not just the betrayal, but the pattern behind it. See, when someone lies to you for that long, it's not just about the lie itself. It's about what the lie needs to survive. Richard didn't just cheat. He needed Margaret to stay in a box. He needed her to not ask too many questions about the business trips. He needed her to trust that the money was handled. He needed her to believe that her life was small and manageable and that he was the one keeping it all together. And every time she accepted that, every time she said, okay, instead of, show me, he got a little more confident that she would never look behind the curtain. That's not love. That's control dressed up in a nice suit. And the worst part is, he got their own son to help hold the curtain in place. Kyle didn't keep the secret because he thought it was right. He kept it because his father made him believe that telling the truth would hurt more than the lie. And that is how it always works. The person doing wrong convinces the people around them that exposing it would be worse. That protecting the liar is the same thing as protecting the family. It's not. It never is. Protecting the truth is what protects the family. Everything else is just fear wearing a mask. Margaret understood that now. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The grief burned itself out, and what was left behind was something cold and steady and clear. She was done being managed. She was done being the last one to know. Now she was going to be the one who decided what happened next. On the 4th morning, Margaret woke up before dawn and knew exactly what she was going to do. She took a long shower. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made her feel like herself again. Not the widow everyone pitied. Not the confused old woman her own son had talked down to. She looked in the mirror and saw someone older, yes. Tired, yes. But sharp. Awake. Ready. She drove downtown to a building she had passed 100 times and never noticed. 3rd floor, frosted glass door. A small brass plaque that read, Mercer and Associates, Private Investigations. The man behind the desk was in his 60s, thinning hair, a face that looked like it had heard every kind of ugly story and stopped being surprised decades ago. He studied her without speaking when she sat down. I need to find someone, she said. Someone who is legally dead but very much alive. That got his attention. She told him everything. Not the emotions, not the years of devotion, just the facts. The staged accident. The closed casket. The new identity. The house in Savannah. The children calling him Grandpa. She showed him the photos. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. If what you're telling me is accurate, this goes way beyond an affair. This is identity fraud. Financial theft. And whoever helped him is an accessory. I know, she said. It's going to take time. And it's going to cost money. I can pay. I want everything documented. Not suspected. Proven. He named a figure. She didn't flinch. She wrote the check right there. This was not emotion spending. This was an investment in her own future. Over the next week, Margaret did something she had never done in her marriage. She watched. She observed. She paid attention to details not because someone asked her to, but because she chose to. She returned to the pale blue house at different hours, wearing hats and sunglasses, sitting in a rental car instead of her own. She learned his schedule. He left every weekday at 8:15. He returned by 5:30. Weekends were for the grandchildren. Sundays were for church. A good man, his neighbors probably said. A quiet man. A family man. She also learned the name he used. David Callahan. The work he claimed to do, consulting for a marine parts distributor out of Jacksonville. The modest life he wore like a costume. The investigator called her 7 days later. I've got enough for a full report. You should come in. The folder he handed her was thick. Heavy. Every page a nail in a coffin Richard had built for himself. A fake birth certificate issued years after he was supposedly born. Bank accounts opened under the false name with nearly $2 million transferred before the staged accident. Utility records and tax filings tying him to 2 households for over 2 decades. And on the last page, phone records. Regular calls between Richard and Kyle, before the accident, after the funeral, during the 8 months Margaret thought she was completely alone. Kyle hadn't just known. He had stayed involved the entire time. Margaret closed the folder slowly and said, "Thank you." That afternoon, she walked into the office of a litigation attorney named Diane Prescott, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and zero patience for nonsense. Margaret had found her through the grief support group at church, of all places. One of the other widows had mentioned her name in passing, said she was the kind of lawyer you call when the truth needs teeth. Margaret laid the folder on the desk and said, "I need someone who understands fraud, identity theft, and financial crimes." Diane read every page. When she looked up, her expression was hard. "What you're describing is a criminal conspiracy. Your husband committed identity fraud and financial theft. Your son aided and benefited. You are entitled to full restitution, and there are strong grounds for criminal charges. What do you need from me?" Margaret asked. "A confession would help. Especially from your son. We also need proof of the asset transfers and forged authorizations." Margaret already knew where those documents were. Kyle kept an office at the main supply warehouse. Richard had given her a spare key years ago for emergencies. She had never used it. Until now. But first, she needed Kyle to talk. She called him that afternoon. "Hey," she said softly. "I'm tired of fighting. I don't want to be angry anymore. I just need to understand everything so I can move on." Relief flooded his voice. "Of course, Mom. Whatever you need. Let's have lunch tomorrow. Somewhere quiet. Just us." He agreed without a second thought. That night, Margaret placed a small voice recorder in her purse. She practiced keeping her hands still. She rehearsed her questions until they sounded like a mother seeking comfort, not a woman building a case. At lunch the next day, she let him talk. She asked gentle questions. When did the plan start? How was the money moved? Who signed what? Where did the business proceeds go after this death? Each answer came easily now, unguarded, because Kyle believed the storm had passed. He thought she was still his mother, still safe, still the woman who always forgave. He didn't notice the recorder. He didn't notice that every word he spoke was sealing his own fate. While they ate, Diane and the investigator were already at work. With the financial records Margaret had provided, they secured emergency access to banking documents through the court. The transactions confirmed everything. Forged signatures. Unauthorized transfers. Funds wired into accounts Kyle controlled. By the time lunch was over, the trap was closed. That afternoon, Diane filed a complaint with the district attorney's office. Fraud. Forgery. Financial exploitation. Identity theft. 2 hours later, she called Margaret. The case has been accepted. Warrants are being prepared. Margaret sat alone in her living room. The house was quiet. No music. No television. Just the ticking of the hallway clock. She thought of the woman she had been 8 months ago, crying into an empty pillow, begging a dead man to come back. That woman would not have survived this. But Margaret was no longer her. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel triumph. She felt resolved. The truth was no longer hers alone. Soon, it would belong to the law. They thought she would mourn forever. They thought silence meant weakness. They were wrong. The first call came at dawn. Not from Kyle. From Diane. The warrants have been executed. Your son was taken into custody early this morning. No resistance. Margaret closed her eyes and let the words settle. Somewhere across Savannah, Kyle was in handcuffs, being led to a car in front of neighbors who had smiled at him for years. The weight of that didn't feel like victory. It felt like something that was always going to happen, just waiting for someone to finally pull the thread. An hour later, her phone started ringing. Kyle's number, over and over. She didn't answer. Then a text from Kyle's wife. What did you do? Short. Shaking with anger or fear or both. Margaret set the phone face down and made herself a cup of coffee. She drank it slowly by the kitchen window, watching the morning light fill the backyard, the same yard where she had planted a garden for Richard every spring. By noon, the news had spread through the family. Cousins. Old friends. People who had stood at the funeral and hugged her and told her she was strong. Now they were calling with questions they didn't really want answered. She ignored every single one. At 2 in the afternoon, Diane called again. There's something else. The identity he's been using, David Callahan, it's being formally invalidated. The accounts under that name are frozen. He has nowhere to hide. That was the moment Margaret knew she had to see him. Not to argue. Not to scream. Not to ask why, because she already knew why. She needed to end it. Face to face. On her terms. She drove back to the quiet street with the pale blue house. But this time she didn't park down the block. She didn't hide behind sunglasses or a rented car. She pulled right up front, stepped out, walked to the door, and rang the bell. The woman answered. Claudia. She looked at Margaret with polite confusion, the kind of expression you give a stranger who might be lost. Can I help you? I'm here to see David. It's urgent. Claudia hesitated, then stepped aside. He's out back. Margaret walked through the house. She noticed things. A family portrait on the wall. Kids' drawings on the fridge. A pair of reading glasses on the kitchen counter that looked exactly like the ones Richard used to leave all over their house. Every detail was a small knife. He was in the backyard near the fence, tools in his hands, sleeves rolled up. For a second, he didn't see her. Then he turned. The recognition was instant. No mask this time. No rehearsed confusion. Just raw fear. Margaret, he whispered. She held out a large envelope. These are legal documents. You need to read them. His hands trembled as he took the papers. His eyes moved quickly across the pages. She watched the color drain from his face the way water drains from a sink, slow at first, then all at once. What is this? He asked. What did you do? I didn't do anything, she replied. I told the truth. He looked past her, toward the house. Does she know? Margaret raised her voice just enough to carry. She knows now. Claudia appeared in the back doorway, arms crossed, confusion sharpening into something else. What's going on? Richard didn't speak. I am his wife, Margaret said. His legal wife. We were married for 38 years. The man you know as David doesn't exist. The silence that followed was so heavy it pressed against Margaret's chest. Claudia stared at Richard. Her lips parted, but no sound came out for a long moment. Is this true? He closed his eyes. You told me you were widowed, she whispered. You said you had no one. He had someone, Margaret said. Me. Richard dropped to his knees on the concrete patio. Not dramatically, not for show. His legs simply gave out. Margaret, please. I can explain. No, she said. You've explained enough. You chose deception. You chose theft. You chose to erase me from my own life. She could hear sirens in the distance. Faint, but getting closer. They're coming, he said hoarsely. Yes. Margaret, he called as she turned to leave. For the years we shared. For what we were. She stopped. But she did not turn around. What we were was real to me, she said. That's why you will never understand what you destroyed. She walked back through the house. Past the family portrait. Past the drawings on the fridge. Past Claudia, who was standing in the hallway now, crying quietly, one hand over her mouth. Margaret did not stop. She did not apologize. She had nothing to apologize for. Outside, the sirens were loud now. A patrol car turned onto the street as she reached her car. She sat behind the wheel and watched in the rearview mirror as two officers walked to the front door. She did not wait to see them lead him out. She started the engine and drove away. The sun was high and bright and the road ahead was clear. Whatever Richard had buried, the truth had dug it up. And nothing built on lies survives the light. Richard died 3 weeks later. He suffered a heart attack in the county holding facility while awaiting formal charges. The call came early in the morning, calm and procedural. He passed at 5:20 a.m. You're listed as next of kin. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. She didn't feel relief. She didn't feel sorrow. What she felt was distance, as if the man they were describing had already left her life the moment she walked out of that backyard. Cremate him, she said. Scatter the ashes offshore. No service. He already took enough from me. He doesn't get one more performance. The legal process moved forward without him. The fake identity was dissolved. The frozen accounts were restored. The assets hidden or transferred under false authority were recovered by the court. What had been stolen came back to where it belonged. Kyle accepted a plea deal. He was sentenced to prison for financial fraud and forgery. Not a lifetime, but long enough to understand what his choices cost. They spoke once after the sentencing. I love you, Margaret told him. But love doesn't erase consequences. He nodded. For the first time, he didn't argue. Months passed. The house felt lighter. Margaret repainted the bedroom. She donated Richard's recliner without ceremony. She went back to her garden. She traveled with friends from church. She laughed without guilt. She slept through the night for the first time in years. Grief hadn't destroyed her. Silence had. And truth had saved her. One afternoon, she visited the cemetery where a stranger still lay beneath her husband's name. She stood there briefly, not to mourn, but to close a door. That grave didn't hold her husband. It held the version of herself who had believed without question, who had loved so hard she forgot to protect herself. She left without looking back. Today, Margaret's life is quieter. Smaller in some ways. Stronger in every way that matters. She no longer confuses loyalty with self-erasure. She no longer believes love requires silence. Dignity is not something a marriage gives you or a family grants you. It's something you claim the moment you refuse to be lied to any longer. And even after betrayal, even after decades of deception, it is never too late to choose yourself. That choice changes everything. If Margaret's story hit you the way it hit me, I want you to know you're not alone. Every week on this channel, I collect real stories from people on Reddit, Quora, and other forums, with their permission. I change the names and circumstances, add some fiction for privacy, and break it all down with psychological insights so we can learn, so we can recognize the patterns, and so we can give it right back if we ever meet people like this in our own lives. If this is your first time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you've been here before, thank you for coming back. Go check out some of the other stories on this channel. I think you'll find one that speaks to you. Take care of yourself. You're worth more than anyone's lie. I'll see you in the next one.